Hey everyone, this is Jeff Culhane, voice of the Florida State Seminoles, and you're listening to the Phillip Jordan Show podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Phillip Jordan Show podcast. I am Phillip Jordan, writer for the Auburn Wire, part of USA Today. Got a fun show planned for you guys here on the podcast. Going to be looking back at the Sweet 16 Elite 8 with Blake Lovell of the Southeastern 16. We'll also talk about Auburn's NIT run and can they bring home the NIT championship. I don't think any Auburn fans are going to be actually wearing a shirt because there would be trolling involved if they did. And we get into wrestling too as well. Blake covers wrestling over Sports Illustrated. I'm a big wrestling fan. It is WrestleMania season. We'll talk about that and much, much more here on the podcast. You can check out the podcast over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I'll read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight-up hater or probably an Alabama fan also. You can check out the show over on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video, and I'll read those on the future edition as well. You can always email me at philipjordanmedia@gmail.com. Now I'll jump into it with Blake Lovell from the Southeastern 16, and let's talk some basketball, NIT, a little wrestling. Good show. Hope you enjoy it. All right, everybody, joining me on today's episode. We're going to talk some basketball, maybe some other stuff. We'll see how things go toward the end of this recording. I'm joined by a good friend, Blake Lovell. You can check him out over at the Southeastern 16. Covers wrestling, too, over at Sports Illustrated, and has NFL Pod established to pass. Blake just has a bunch of different things out there. We're here to talk college hoops with him right now, and Blake, appreciate you coming on as always.
Yeah, I always enjoy it, Phillip. Yeah, this is usually a pretty busy time of year due to certain events in multiple sports. So it's a fun time, though, and unfortunately for the SEC, we won't be having too much partying going on in the Final Four since there are no teams this year. But, hey, we still got teams playing in March/April, and we'll get to those at some point.
Yeah, hit the Auburn Tigers as one of them, and we'll talk about them just a little bit. I guess I'll start off with just how's the bracket looking?
You know, it was looking really good. I think I was leading our Southeastern 16 pool of about 100 people in the Sweet 16, and I was just, of course, I'm just hyping it up, and man, it's the best bracket I've ever had, and sitting at number 1, right, in the Southeastern 16 pool, the family league, like all that stuff. And then, of course, the Sweet 16 happened, and from there, it didn't exactly go too well. I've slid down the bracket a little bit. But I'll tell you a funny story. I've got to look at the updated number here, but my sister-in-law in the family group. Now, how many games she watched this year? I'm going to guess probably 0. But I will tell you that right now, she, of course, has the same national champion as me. I'm in second, Phillip. She also has Arizona winning this whole thing. But her bracket on ESPN is ranked 2,777 out of millions of people. Millions. And she somehow has the Final Four exactly correct with UConn and Illinois, Arizona and Michigan. She's got Illinois over UConn, Arizona over Michigan, Arizona winning it all. She got the entire Midwest bracket without a single flaw. I mean, I don't know. So, am I a little bitter? You could say that.
So last year, my now wife, her coworkers had a bracket, and then I started one. So they decided to jump into mine. And then one of her coworkers, same deal as you, probably has not watched a single game of basketball all year, but beats me in the bracket. And then retires from it. So she did not do it this year. So I could not have my revenge and reclaim that title. So I kind of get what you mean on that. It's like people who watch this all year long do the brackets. You think you know everything about the sport, and then people who have not watched a single game have a better bracket than you do. It's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, it is. And I always say every year, I'm like, I don't care about this. And then, of course, you're sitting in the top spot in the Sweet 16. You're like, you know what? I do care about this. And then you just completely let down after that. So,
Well, a certain shot yesterday on Sunday messed up me from. I was leading that bracket, and I'm still leading, but since that team was my champion, is not going to be around. So we'll talk about them a little bit. I remember, and we talked last year, the SEC went in, had the 14 teams. This year it was the 10. Obviously, knew what happened last year was not going to happen again. That was just impossible. Not impossible, but, you just couldn't predict that happening again. And of course, Tennessee was the last team to go out. Of course, they ran into Michigan. How would you kind of grade away the SEC? Because last year they were looked at as it was the best conference in college basketball. Florida won the national title. Obviously, do not have one in the Final Four. How would you kind of like sum up, if you could, this SEC basketball season?
Yeah, I think, and we kind of figured this early on, and I don't want to say we were probably even talking about it last preseason, was just that you weren't going to see the strength at the top, which meant there was a lot more variety of outcomes. Like, because you weren't going to have those guaranteed teams that you're just like, these are can't miss, like, 4 in the Elite Eight type year. And then, of course, getting 2 in the Final Four and 1 wins it all. It just everything worked out last year because you had the best rosters and you just had the best assortment of talent. And going into this year, you could tell on paper after an offseason where the SEC just really swung and missed on a lot of big transfers. And even some of the guys they brought in, whether it was Jaden Quaintance or others, you're just kind of like, all right, we're in wait and see mode because we don't know exactly what this is going to look like. And I think that was the biggest difference to me, was that you just did not have that group at the top that felt like they were sort of not necessarily invincible, but these were teams that were beatable. And I mean, it even goes for Florida. I mean, as good as they were down the stretch, which they were fantastic, they were still a team that even me and Max at Southeastern 16 are talking about heading into that Vanderbilt game in the SEC tournament. We're like, matchup wise, this is the kind of team that Florida could struggle against, because they do things that, again, are going to force Florida defensively to do some things they don't necessarily want to do and are good at. And so you kind of saw that play out in that game. Then, of course, they get kind of a similar matchup against Iowa, and they both result in losses. And so, when you looked at teams like Alabama, Arkansas, even Vanderbilt, Tennessee to a certain extent, certainly had disappointing teams like Kentucky. I think Missouri, probably a little bit disappointing. Auburn, of course, didn't finish where people thought they would. So you kind of had, I think, maybe more overall depth, but I don't think you had anywhere near that consistency that you had last year. And I think that was the biggest difference, is you had a lot of big-time transfers. You felt like wound up going to the Big Ten or wound up going to the Big 12. And, SEC teams were kind of left scrambling a little bit. Still had a lot of good players and still had a lot of good rosters, but when you eventually got to matchups against the teams that were kind of regularly in the top 10 all year long, that was going to be problematic, I think, for a lot of these teams.
Especially when you run into Michigan. That was a problem, which Arkansas also ran into Arizona in this round as well. So did not land on the side of bracket to get you to potentially the Final Four. And Michigan is just their size. And then, with what they can do, and then the runs. I mean, Alabama started good, 11-2, but that was a game too with them. I just felt like, and you had to be able to shoot lights out from 3, and then the fact that they didn't, it really hurt them. Because, of course, according to Nate Oates, if Charles Bediako was eligible to play in the game, they would have beaten Michigan, according to what he said. And then, of course, against Tennessee, they go on that 21-0 run. I mean, Tennessee's up 16-14. They're causing some turnovers. Gillespie is making some points. Nate Ament did not have a great game, because also know he was injured coming into this thing. You look at Michigan and just kind of what they did in these 2 games against 2 solid SEC teams. I mean, they're not just beating teams; they're blowing them out.
Yeah, I think Michigan has a gear that no one else has, and that goes for Arizona, which to me, this is, it doesn't work this way, but this is kind of your de facto national championship game. I think these are the 2 best teams, without question, that are left in Michigan and Arizona. But one of them's going to have to beat the other one and then beat somebody else to win it all. And so I think, again, Michigan has a gear that even Arizona, I don't think, has when they get going. Like, I just think that they are the best team. And, like you said, you saw that against Alabama where, I was at the same thing. I said, Alabama's got to shoot 53s. And you got to hope that you make 20 plus of those. That was the best chance they had. And, that wound up not being the case at all, where they go like 14 of, I don't remember what it was, 14 of 47, something like that. So, the math just didn't add up because you weren't going to get as many good looks from anywhere other than 3 in this game. And so, that was an issue. And then I thought what was really interesting for Michigan, and it's pretty impressive in my opinion, you go from playing Alabama to then 2 days later having to play Tennessee. And you think about the differences in your game planning and your strategy, like completely different teams. And so I thought that's what, to me, made it even more impressive is how they did it, because they didn't just go from playing, let's say, in Alabama to playing whoever you would even say is similar to Alabama, right? Like even maybe in Illinois in some sense. But that's not even a great comparison. That's more so just the offensive output. Illinois slows the ball down a bit more. But I think that's the thing, is you went to playing a defensive-minded Tennessee team that was going to beat you on the glass and all this other stuff, and yet result didn't matter. Like it just absolutely took it to them. And so, I think that's, again, if right now, I think Michigan's probably the favorite to win this thing. But this will be one of the most anticipated Final Four games, we've ever seen. Statistically, it's the best Final Four game we've ever seen, just from like the Ken Palm era and all that. These are the 2 best teams that have ever played each other in the Final Four, I think. So, it's going to be one to see for sure.
Yeah, because Arizona has run through their opponents too as well.
Yep.
They have not had a close game. Looking at Alabama, and I feel like this is a conversation about them we've probably been looking at for a few years now, maybe since Charles Bediako was there when he was supposed to be there. Is Alabama has the guards, and they've had them the last several years, but it always comes down when they get to March is they do not have the size to go up against these teams like Michigan, or if they ran to an Arizona. We've kind of seen that last couple of years. What do you think is next for Nate Oates in this program?
So I think this applies to Alabama. I think this applies to every team in the SEC not named Florida. Everybody this offseason, the buzzword is going to be size. Like everyone wants to do what Michigan, Arizona, and so forth have done, and that is make sure your roster is filled with guys that can win you games 5 feet and in on both sides of the court, offensively, defensively, rebounding. Like you remember, there's always these cycles in college basketball where however many years ago it's positionless basketball, right? Like everybody, let's just go play all the 6'4" guys. Like everybody's got to be 6'4" on the floor. Don't get anybody out there any taller, because that may hurt your rhythm. Don't do that. Get everybody out on the perimeter, and everybody has to be able to shoot, right? And if you do have a guy that's 6'10", well, he can't play near the rim. He's got to be out there on the perimeter. Like, come on, this is how you win, right? But now it's the complete opposite. Now it's like, if I'm a coach and I see how this Final Four and Elite Eight played out, I'm going out and trying to find a way to play 3 6'10" guys together. And, it's like, just why not? Because that's where we're seeing a lot of this really be won. And I think, again, that's the big difference. When you have a Michigan out there who's got Yaxel at 6'9", Morris Johnson at 6'9", Morris 7'3", and then you look at Arizona and, well, what do they've got? Oh, yeah, well, they've got Mo Krivas at 7'2", Koa Pete 6'8", you got Toba Waka at 6'8", and you've got guys that just, again, you're playing with all, your guards are big. Like that, to me, is going to be, for Alabama, anybody else. Tennessee, it shouldn't be that surprising why Tennessee was maybe the last SEC team standing, because if you looked at it overall, you had Okpara, you had Estrella, you had Carey, and Dwayne Brown. Like, you keep going down the line, you're like, well, I can understand it, because you had to have a build like that to be able to get to this point. And Florida probably would have gotten there if not for just a terrible final, 10 seconds of the game. In all honesty. So I think that's the thing to me. Like, it's just, you're going to see some of this flip back to where, we got to have great guards. And there were a lot of great guards in the SEC this year, but you're about to see a big run, I think, on let's go out and get as big as we can. And we're going to try to find a way to win this game within the free throw line. Like, we're going to go from the free throw line and in. That's how we're going to win our games next season. So,
you got to feel for Rick Barnes. I mean, he's had such a terrific run there at Tennessee, but there's like a wall and the Elite Eight, and he just he can't break through on there. And I think this team was a little bit different than what he's had the last couple of years, where they were still that physical, tough team, but they had a little bit more of a punch offensively, especially with what Gillespie did. He had 21 points against Michigan, and Ament was good most of the year. Felt they had more offensive guys. It kind of, you kind of look at them, can he get them back to this point next year? Obviously, he's going to have a lot of new players, get to another Elite Eight and get that opportunity to get this team to a Final Four.
Yeah, and we always say it's a matchup based thing, and like these past 2 years, they have just run into two of the more statistically elite teams we've ever seen, like Michigan this year, Houston last year, and it's just like, man, like just a terrible thing to have to run through again. Those two teams in particular, Houston didn't win it all last year, but let's call it what it is. Houston probably should have won it all last year. Like Florida just once again did what it did. It had a little magic and. The Gators cut down the nets. The year before they played that Purdue team that probably not historically great, but still went 34-5. Got to the game against UConn in the national championship. Of course, Zach Edey, he's kind of that once in a lifetime type player, probably in terms of like just what he did and how he impacted the game. So yeah, I mean the draw plays into it. But yeah, I mean it's still going to be the discussion about Rick Barnes. Can he get you to the Final Four? But I always say the same thing to Tennessee fans. I'm like, especially now, boy, I have even more use of this stat now. I'm like, would you take 3 Elite Eights, or would you rather be, I don't know, take an SEC team that has gotten to the Elite Eight and then didn't get back to the tournament the next year, or take a team like South Carolina who got to the Final Four how many years ago now? 9.
It feels like forever. It feels like
and
it was forever.
And what's happened since then, right? Like that's the thing. So that sustained success is there, and I completely understand from a fan standpoint. You want to reach that height, and is he the guy to get us there? Well, the thing is, even if he comes back next year, is Rick Barnes going to be the coach there 5 years from now? Probably not. So I'd still take what he's done if I'm a Tennessee fan for this program to have them in that spot every single year now for 3 straight years. It's just kind of the nature of the game these days, right? You're seeing some of these teams that you run into, and you're like, we're maybe one player off or whatever it is, and that's what happens when you get into the NIL era, where sometimes you're just missing that one player that maybe gets you over the top, but then again, sometimes it's just about matchups. So,
yeah, I still remember that matchup against Purdue. Dalton Knecht did everything he could to get Tennessee to the next round, but nobody else showed up against Purdue. Now, you talked about a few minutes ago about last 10 seconds, bad defense. The last game of the weekend, Duke in Connecticut. And I'm watching it. I'm watching the game. They missed that free throw, and it's still 72-69. I said, he's got to miss it and just hope they can just tip it back and hit a 3. He makes it, and I said, okay, all Duke has to do is hold it. All you have to know, there's no backcourt violation, Blake. And then Boozer does what he did, and we have one of the greatest shots in this tournament's history. I think that was just a moment. And what was wild to me is UConn could not hit threes for most of the game. And then Mullins was 0 for 4, 0 for 5 before he hits that last shot from pretty much midcourt. And it's one of those things. And it's one of the things I always look back, thinking you always had to worry about with Calipari's team at Kentucky. They had all the freshmen. And you look at Duke's kind of in that format now, like, yes, they're super talented, but sometimes experience and that basketball 101 does not click right with you. And it was just that yesterday with Duke, and this UConn team. And I'm kind of rambling, I feel like, and now while we look at Arizona and Michigan as the de facto championship game, Hurley's got a shot to do something here pretty incredible. You beat Illinois, at least put yourself in position where he could win 3 out of 4.
Yeah, I said this yesterday and today. I think I was like, I realize like Illinois is seen as the better team, but if I'm Arizona or Michigan, I'd rather play Illinois than I would UConn in a national championship game. There's no chance I'd want to touch having to play Hurley in the title game, just given his track record. No chance. And you can say, they got a little lucky. Of course they did. But guess what? So did Florida last year. So did, you can pick a lot of teams who have had a few bounces go their way and just to, come up with improbable sort of possessions at the end of the game. So, yeah, I wouldn't. I would not want any part of UConn if I'm the winner of that heavyweight, showdown between Michigan and Arizona, because I just think that he is continually put his team in a position. And like you said, I mean, let's call it what it is too. Duke had been playing with fire this entire tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, at some point, it probably catches up with them. And, it didn't in the Siena game where they barely pull it out. The TCU game was a game for a bit. St. John's, you also needed pretty tough plays down the stretch to be able to win that one. And as UConn's making that rally, you're starting to sense, okay, Duke's about to find themselves in this position again. What are they going to do? And then you couldn't have, you play that out 100 times. I think that probably only happens once that you get that exact result, but that's all you need if you're UConn. And so, yeah, it was just not a great possession for Duke, but at some point, hey, I thought it was probably going to catch up with them a little bit.
In watching Duke, and especially watching more during the tournament with Cameron Boozer, and as good as Gracie is, he's going to be in the NBA. He's a super talented player. It feels like he disappears sometimes. Like there's parts of the game where I forget he's on the floor, but I kind of forget he's on the floor. And I know Duke's got other good players too that can make the shots and score points for them. But I don't know. Just for me, sometimes it just feels like he disappears.
Yeah, Duke was kind of. See, that's the thing is like I feel like I was talking about them not long ago, and I'm like, I am talking about Duke who beat Michigan, and I'm just like, yet they're still. They had a feel to them where you were just like, yeah, this was a team that had lost, whatever by a combined. And that's the thing. You look at their, and I feel weird saying this, but I'm like, okay, Duke finishes their season 35-3. They lose those games by a combined 5 points.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, legitimately, they're 5 points away from a perfect season right now heading into the Final Four. But yet, it just always felt like they were kind of a team that, and you look back, like there were quite a few close games that you're just kind of looking back on. You're like, yeah, okay. Yep, they beat Michigan, right? They beat Florida State by a point in the ACC tournament. They beat Virginia by 4. Had a close game against like SMU, Georgia Tech. Obviously beat Florida by a point in a game where it looked like the Gators were about to win in Cameron. And so you look back at some of those, you're just like, they're just going to keep winning, right? But again, it's like one of these close games, they got to lose eventually. And, that was one, like you said, there were some trends you could see with his team, whether just from a player standpoint or whatever, that you're just like, man, surely that someone's going to get them, right? And I thought it was going to wind up being in the national championship game against probably either Arizona or Michigan. But, yeah, turns out it was UConn.
I guess it should have been concerning when they played Siena at halftime, and I forget which player they got interviewed, but we did not take them seriously. We thought it was going to be a cakewalk. I was like, okay, that is a problem in mindset with this basketball team.
Yeah, not what you want to be saying necessarily. So,
and then if you think it, don't say it.
Right.
I mean, it's one thing to think that, but please don't say it. So you mentioned I'm sorry, anybody listening to this, watching this, we're not going to talk about Oklahoma in the Crown. I'm sorry. I'm go to Locked on Sooners or something like that. I'm sure they're giving the best breakdown possible of that tournament. But Auburn and NIT, but we'll talk about that. And I honestly, they had a bad first half against South Alabama, but then they really turned it on, and they've been playing well. And look, a lot of jokes will be made. They win the NIT championship. There'll be a lot of jokes with other SEC teams and Stephen Pearl, Bruce Pearl, and all that stuff that they win the whole thing. But I think it's good for Stephen Pearl getting these extra reps coaching. And I just think the team they've really shown that a great effort to come out and just win this thing. And we talked off air. Auburn should win this after this weekend. They play Illinois State on Thursday night. And of course the championship would be Sunday night. But kind of like you kind of look at this with Stephen Pearl, how important is it just getting these extra reps, you think, with him as a coach and leading this team and I even saw today, he'd mentioned Keyshawn Hall was one of the guys that was pushing for this to go play in NIT, because I think a lot of people wouldn't have been shocked if Auburn would have turned down the opportunity, but they've made the most of it. And it just was kind of your overall thoughts on this NIT run.
Yeah, I think it's one where, like you said, I'm not surprised that, people are like, well, they're not going to accept this. I'm like, I'm not really surprised by that. I think it's, kind of one where everything now is sort of situational, right? And we've always kind of said that with this current state of the NIT, and it really just depends on where your program's at and what you're aiming to do. And if you're Auburn, knowing that this season was a disappointment based on what the program has become, and you do have some players on the roster that you feel like you have a pretty good chance of bringing back, then there's really nothing that hurts this. And like you said, I mean, it's even just having a head coach that would love to be able to just coach more games. There was a lot that made sense, I think, for Auburn to do this, especially, again, feeling like that they were right there, the first team out or whatever, the NCAA tournament, and thinking, okay, hey, let's just use this. Like, let's use this experience. We do have some younger guys on this roster. Also have some older guys, as you mentioned. Hey, if we feel pretty good about bringing a decent group of this, back, then why not just play more games and see how it works? Mm-hmm. And so, yes, like they're obviously, I think at this point, you look at the rest of the field. Yeah, like it was set up pretty well for Auburn to be in a position to win this tournament on paper. But, you don't win tournaments on paper. And so for them to play the 3 games they played so far, find ways to win some of these games that were close, and, now be in a position where, you are kind of, going to a pretty fun historical place in Indianapolis to play at Hinkle and all this stuff. Like, I get it. Like, it's not what Auburn fans are used to. But you also have to reset your expectations, I think, of how easy this was going to be after this move was made. I mean, I even mentioned to you probably going into the season, I said, admittedly, before Bruce Pearl even announced that he was not going to be the coach this year, I was not as high on this Auburn team as some people seem to be. I just thought the roster was so different from last year, and I think anyone expecting the same results, was probably kidding themselves. And so you knew there were going to be some ups and downs. And so now for them to take this experience of getting left out of the NCAA tournament, and to just use it to have some sort of positive momentum going into the offseason to try to kind of change the narrative a little bit, I don't see a big problem with that. Now, will they get trolled, Phillip, on social media and all that by opposing fan base? Of course they will. But guess what? None of that means anything. What matters is kind of the momentum you have as a program. And, if they go out and win the NIT, of course they'll get all kinds of heckling and all this other stuff. But it's going to put them in a pretty decent position versus if they're left out of the NCAA tournament and we're just sitting back saying, oh, man, what a terrible season. Well, no, give a little positive going into the transfer portal and all this. So,
and definitely kind of like a point you made earlier up front, get some more sides is going to be, imperative for this team going in next year, especially if you're able, if the Hod Pepper come back. I think I've seen some favor. Kevin Overton wants to be back. You got some guards here on this team, and I think Magwood has showed some stuff there in this tournament, that he's capable at position 2 as well. So should be interested with them as Thursday and potentially Sunday on Easter if they can bring in a championship, with back-to-back Final Four. So I think that's the way Auburn can do it. So
you don't have to be specific about that. There's no lie in what you just said. It's back-to-back Final Fours. There's not a single lie there.
Nope.
So
not a single one. Not a single one. So before we get here, good basketball talk. Of course, Blake, I can never have you on without having a little bit of a wrestling conversation.
Please.
Before we get out here. So I thought about, how am I going to do it? I try to do it a little bit differently every time I have you on, just to kind of mix it up. So I want to play a game with you called Who Should Go Over? Not necessarily who you think will go over, but who should go over. So I've got 6 matches I'm going to ask you about. Let me change our background to match the conversation.
Oh, yes. Here we go.
There. All right. And now I have a banner prepared for us as well. Who should go over? So I got 6 matches. 5 of the 6 are championship matches. So let's go with the non-title match first. Who should go over, Brock or Obafemi?
I think you know me pretty well here, Phillip, and who I'm going to pick in this one. There is only one choice, and I was even listening to someone today who I greatly respect was bantering about the possibility of why, it's okay if Oba loses here. They can do the rematch, and then as long as he gets his back, that's all that matters. I completely disagree. I think there is just nothing that Brock Lesnar winning here does for you in any way, shape, or form. If Brock wants to have his retirement match at SummerSlam, It does not matter whether he wins or loses here, period. My fear is that he's going to win, and they're going to set up Gunther for him for SummerSlam so Gunther can retire him, and he needs a win, right? He's got to have that momentum. Forget all that. Throw all your plans out the window. Oba is the guy. He needs to win, and he's got to be the guy by the end of the year. And we don't say that often in this era, but he has it, and you got to run with it.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I have found myself entering a room doing the walk. It's just,
Yeah, of course.
You have to do it. Then people look at you and say, "What are you doing?" I'm like,
yeah.
If you're wrestling,
they'll know soon enough. They'll know soon enough. Yeah.
All right, we're going to do the ladies. I got 3 women's matches here for you. Who should go over, Becky or AJ? I think this is a tough one.
That's a good question. I think it's got to be Becky. And the reason I say that is I just feel like, but it is a tough one, because the reason why I would go back and forth on this one is because I almost think, like, I know Becky's kind of made this title, but you got to get her back into the world, the top title picture. And so, certainly probably the context thing is just a matter of, okay, well, how long is AJ sticking around, or what's she going to be doing? And I think Becky's the choice here. But again, I say that knowing that you probably got to get her into the top title picture sooner rather than later. So doing this becomes a bit of an issue.
All right. So obviously this is the Raw Women's Championship. Liv or please. Stephanie? Who should go over?
An easy one. It's Liv. And I have nothing against Stephanie, but I think, again, I think we saw what Liv had done before, the injury and all that. And I just think that she has become she's basically become the top star. And I just feel like that she probably needs to win here. And, basically be the person that's on top. And then all of a sudden you've got people that are chasing her. And I think it works pretty well. I feel like they've done a pretty good job with Stephanie, just in terms of establishing what they want her to be. But at the same time, I just think it's like Liv is their it star too. And I just think she's going to win.
All right. The other women's championship match. Who should go over, Rhea Ripley or Jade? This one's hard because I feel like if Bianca Belair was healthy, she would be in this match. I feel like this would be her spot, not Rhea. But anyways, who you got? Who should go over?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like you said, it's a should thing. Who should? Probably Jade. Just because I think you're wanting to set up the thing with Bianca, and just don't know when that's going to be. But I think Jade probably should win. It won't make everyone happy, but that's okay. I just don't think Rhea needs this right now. I almost feel like it's like, if you want to make Jade, this is the time to do it. And I'm not saying it's going to be pretty necessarily in terms of the match may not be a classic, but I think this is the way to make her, and having her beat Rhea signals that you're all in here and you're just waiting to get to Bianca. So I'm going to probably pick Jade on that one.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you on that one. So let's the men's world title matches, and I debated which one I would put first, but let's go with the Raw side. Who should go over? And this one's a hard one for me. Just talking to some friends of mine that watch wrestle too, Roman or Punk, and because it's like one of the things you can kind of see it going either way. Which we're recording this on Monday night, and I'm sure tonight Roman's going to come out, call Punk old, and then Punk's going to say Roman needs help. I'm sure it's going to be the recycled same thing, and those get involved somewhere, some point. It's one of the. I think it's a hard one on when you look at who do you think will or who should go over in that one.
So this probably will not be a popular choice, but I actually think it's Roman, and the reason why is because I think there's 2 reasons now. I think initially their thought was Roman has to be the guy coming out of WrestleMania, which understandably means that you're not going to have your champion every week. But my thinking is that if you eventually want to make a Braun Breaker or an Oba Femi, I think it means more for them to beat Roman than it does for them to beat Punk. And that's not a knock on Punk. It's just, let's call it what it is. Like, Roman has been the face of WWE for how many years? And I think if you wanted to make one of those guys potentially at a SummerSlam, right? You don't even necessarily, look, I have nothing against, Italy. I have nothing against any of these other shows that are going to happen afterwards, like Backlashes in Tampa or whatever. I'm like, you don't need Roman for all those. You just don't. And so it's not as big of a deal as it used to be based on the fact that all these shows have 5 matches that aren't WrestleMania, basically, right? So you don't need that match every time. You don't need this guy wrestling every month. So I think it's Roman because I think, again, you need to, if you're going to make your next guy, I think you need to do it at SummerSlam just like they've done for years. Go back. Who was made at SummerSlam? Brock was made at SummerSlam. Orton was made at SummerSlam. Like, you just keep going down the line, right? And so I feel like that is, to me, a great place to just have Roman win the title here. Punk gets into something else, which, they can do a rematch or whatever. But I think your end goal, to me, if I'm looking at like a SummerSlam, I'm like, Brock versus Gunther is probably a match that feels pretty obvious. And then it's probably Roman versus whoever. I mean, you got to get Cody in there somewhere with Orton or whatever, however you do that. But I'm just like, I think Roman needs the title coming out of it. And I think you can also reignite some of that stuff with Sammy and Jay. And like, I think you got a lot more options if Roman wins. So,
and I feel like even though we may not want to see it, you still have to kind of have some kind of conclusion between Punk and Seth, because that's still out there. And then I think there's still business to be had between Roman and Seth Rollins.
Right. And they were going to do that, I think, before Seth got injured. I feel like that was the match they wanted to get to, and it just never happened. So
that leads to the final one. Randy Orton and Cody. And in my personal opinion, the wrong person turned heel. This could have been the Cody Rhodes heel turn, because no one is booing Randy Orton. It's like last year with Cena. Yes, he got booed at first, but then the fans are just going to stick with the veterans like that. There's just some guys who get the point. You're in that point in career, you're not getting booed, and Randy's not getting booed. I feel like Randy Orton should go over. The belt should come off Cody Rhodes, and we should get Orton. But who do you think should go over?
Yeah, this is a tough one, because I think, like you said, look at people are cheering Randy Orton for doing all these bad things, which is, I cannot believe in my mind that they did not see this coming. But I say that they put Matt Cardona out there in almost a position where, like, he's supposed to get sympathy, and that doesn't happen. They put Jelly Roll out there as if he's supposed to get sympathy in this thing. That didn't happen either. And, like, Cody's not getting the sympathy. And I've got people being like, oh, don't worry, they're going to cheer Cody at WrestleMania. No, they're not. Cody's going to get booed. It's like, this is going to get ugly, I think, in terms of, like, everyone is cheering for Randy Orton. And I said one of the things I had a problem with, they should have never introduced the idea that this 15th world title actually meant something significant to Orton if you were going to turn him. Because now you've given people a reason to cheer for him to achieve his goal. Like, why? Well, I mean, like, we know that in our minds, but guess what? I'm willing to bet that there's a decent chunk of the 20,000 people that are in the arena sometimes at night that don't even know how many title reigns this guy has. So by introducing it, like, you have given them a reason to, oh, wow, this sounds cool. Well, let's do it. Like, hey, let's cheer this guy. And so, honestly, I think Cody needs to win, but I think it needs to be Cody winning, and you now set in motion something just so different than what we've seen before. And, because I think that's the thing, is now, if Cody's the person who denies Randy Orton that 15th title, well, now we have a reason to boo this guy even more. And he becomes like the John Cena, where it's like this, there are people who want to cheer him, but he's also the guy who's denying what we really want. And now you can keep running with that into Cody and whoever else, right? So I think Cody probably should win, but only if they are willing to do something a little bit different with him and not just stay the course like they are now. Because, and I'm not even saying you got to just completely make this guy like oh, well, I hate all you fans or anything like that. You don't have to go that far. But you got to do something different.
Is there anybody on the roster Randy Orton could attack that they would boo him?
That's the thing. Honestly, Trick Williams. Like, if he attacked Trick, they might boo him because they love Trick so much too. And it's like they're so backwards on a lot of these guys right now, where I mean, I say that half jokingly, but like honestly, I feel that way. Like he could probably attack Trick, and they'd be like, "Oh, wait a second, hold on, like don't attack Trick. We love this guy. Attack Sammy. They'd be cheering 100%. Like it just feels like it's so backwards.
I have
With
it.
that right now,
I know who would boo, who he could attack, and they would boo Randy Orton, Danhausen.
There you go. Well, I would say most people, but if you took him back to Chicago with the reaction he had to coming out of the box, I'm convinced they'd be all in on radio. They'd be chanting one more time.
Yeah,
That's a good question though. I don't even know who you could throw in there. So
maybe Roman, maybe.
yeah, maybe like I don't know. Like it's a great question because I'm like I don't even know who you could put in that. I mean, I'll tell you an obvious one. Like if you brought Kevin Owens out, first time we've seen him or whatever, right? And it's like he's coming off this big injury, and if you did something like that, which would tie into the story, they don't have enough time now, I think necessarily, unless that's who Orton's talking to. But you could do something like that, I think, and that would be the only one right now that just pops into my head. So,
or bring Steve Austin back and have him attack him.
sure, there you go. That would work too. So,
I don't know. Just it obviously is hard to do, but anyway, it's been a lot of fun. I figured we'd have some fun with that part to kind of close things out.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you coming on, and hey, go check out Blake. If you're a wrestling fan, go check out his work. Interview with Bret Hart here recently, up there on SI, and a bunch of other good stuff there as well. Of course, the basketball stuff with the Southeastern 16 and all that. But Blake, again, appreciate you coming on. And if the listener viewers want to check it out on all the work you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Phillip. Yeah, you can check out all of our SEC stuff, of course, over at Southeastern 16 on YouTube, any podcast app you use there. You mentioned, I do some wrestling stuff for Sports Illustrated, so you can find all of our stuff, our interviews, and all that good stuff over there. Not just us saying it, other people are saying it too. So, yeah, you can find it over there at Sports Illustrated. So,
all right, go check Blake out. Just all a bunch of great stuff he's doing. And Blake, appreciate the time, and I look forward to do this again.
You got it, Phillip. Always enjoy it, man.
All right. Thanks again to Blake for coming on today's episode of the podcast. A lot of fun talking with him. All things Week 16, Elite 8. We talked NIT. We talked a little wrestling there. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Remember, you check me out on social media at P Jordan Sports. Podcast available Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And also check out the show over on YouTube as well. The Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. Hit subscribe button, hit bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video, and I'll read those on a future edition as well. You can always email me at philipjordanmedia@gmail.com. Be back on Wednesday talking all things LSU with Zach Nagy. He is the publisher of LSU on SI. We also talk a little Ole Miss as well. We'll talk Will Wade returning to LSU as head coach. We will talk LSU football and Ole Miss football as well. And we got some Troy stuff coming up later on in the week as well with Josh Boutwell of the Troy Messenger. So a lot of cool conversations come to you this week here on the channel and on the podcast feed. Anyways,